Discerning truth in a sea of lies. Live from Kalispell, Montana, it's Critical Disclosure Radio with your host, Jim White.
Okay, I'm indeed your host, James White. This is Critical Disclosure Radio. Thanks so much for joining us here today on this 6th day of April. Let me turn this down a little bit. 2022. We're delighted to be joining you live from Kalispell, Montana, the last best place on earth, as they say. It's getting pretty jam-packed lately, but we still love it here, and we're delighted to have you here on the broadcast with us today. This show is going to have a little bit of a Montana flair as we welcome Dean Crabb, who's a candidate for the Montana Public Service Commission, District 5. And let me give Dean a brief introduction here. He has over 30 years experience in the power industry, fourth-generation power worker. His son is an apprentice lineman and going to be a fifth-generation line worker. And he also has, let me see here, I have 2 notes here. He is not a politician. He brings hands-on experience to the table. And his motto is knowledge is power. Dean Crabb, thanks so much for joining us here today. You can go ahead and hit that button on the there if you want. Thanks for joining us today here on Critical Disclosure Radio.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Okay, Dean, I'll tell you, let's start off with something that, you know, the Public Service Commission is not an organization that's really known, or an agency that's really known very well by people. If you can, just give us, in your own words, what is the Public Service Commission and what is their role in Montana government?
Well, they're a regulatory agency, so they don't make rules, they don't make laws. They regulate the utilities that are out there to make sure that they're doing a proper job, make sure that their service is good, and that the rates are not out of control.
So basically, they make sure that they stand in between the sort of, I guess the power companies are pretty much monopolies here, right? I mean, they pretty much got a monopoly, so they kind of stand in between the power companies and the folks. Is that accurate?
That is correct. You know, a lot of people state that they're monopolies. If the Public Service Commission is in fact doing their job, they remove the monopoly portion away from them and make it a territory like it's supposed to be. So they put a certain area, let's call it a 50 square mile area, into a territory that a power company can serve the power to. If you don't have that territory, you're going to have 5 sets of poles, 5 gas lines, 5 water lines, everything else going there. You could have a single pole, but you'll have 40 wires on it. It's too much to have too many utilities be inside of one area. So they issue it to one person, they give them the territory, and then the PSC steps in to make sure that they can't just go charge whatever they want to, because they're the only game in town. So they regulate what they can charge, how much they can charge, and the fact that they give a quality service within their territory, and it's supposed to stop them from being a monopoly.
So one of the things, that was discussed last legislative session, was this idea of big tech censorship, and I think there was a bill in there. As a matter of fact, I testified before I think it was some commission or something about that big tech censorship bill. Sadly, it didn't get passed, and then my channels got canceled right after that. But that's another story altogether. Do you think that there is a role for the Public Service Commission to step in and help regulate? I mean, I would think the internet's a utility, and I would think that would be fall under the purview of the Public Service Commission. Is there some way that if you got elected to the District 5 Public Service Commission post, is that something that you'd be interested in pursuing? Is this anti-censorship bill, or some way to keep this big tech out of our lives every single day?
I would like to. Again, the Public Service Commission doesn't make law. I would like to go to the legislatures with quite a few things. One problem that we have with the PSC right now is they used to regulate telephone. And actually they still do, but it's the hard line only. It's the old copper line that's there. They regulate some fiber optics, but only if it's not underneath the internet. And that needs to change, because so much of the information that's coming across is coming across through the internet, through the fiber optics. And there is no regulation within the state of Montana because of the fact that the PSC is outside of that purview. they need to kind of be inside of it so we have control within our state. It's actually stated inside of the documents for what the PSC does, that they are outside of the internet. So any lines that the internet is carried on, the PSC has no control over. I would in fact like to see that looked at by the PSC. And again, we would have to go to the legislators to have that happen.
So I'm thinking, and again, I'm the public service. I mean, that's not my wheelhouse. But if I would think that all of the internet backbone would come off the coax cable would be would at some point it would connect to that. Was that at one point at all? Do you know? Was that under the purview of the Public Service Commission? Because I think they ran the cable. Even this connection that we're having now. I mean, above you can't see it. There's a coax cable that comes in through the wall that hooks up for my internet. So I know it's got to be connected to that somehow.
Right. Well, again, the cable TV is outside of the PSC purview. They do not regulate the coax cable for cable TV. Again, there's a communications word out there that should cover everything, but they've separated it. So cable TV isn't covered. Cell phones aren't covered. Hardline copper, which is the old dial telephones, are covered. But then the other fiber optics that are tied together with internet and certain providers are removed from the PSC. So there's a whole bunch that's taken out and some of it that's put in. And in reality, it should just be communications. It should be the word straight out. Communications is under the purview of the PSC. Yeah, I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, it sounds to me like they're sort of like still in the 20th century and they haven't really made the move into the 21st century, because I mean, I can't even tell you how many, I don't even know if I can on one hand tell you how many people I know that still have those hardwired phones in their house. Most people either have mobile phones or they have internet phones. And most people, I don't know that people have many of those copper wire phones anymore. So yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, is to get into, at least move into this this new era of digital communications.
No, I agree, and they are too far back, because the old copper is still out there hanging in the air. It's in the ground, everything else, but nobody uses it. Even if you did still have a dial phone now at your home, it's going to be on the voice over internet.
Right.
So it's still going to be, put out onto the fiber and everything else. And you're right, the PSC has to come up to the 21st century with that stuff. One of the problems and one of the big reasons why I think that they need to do it is Montana has a PSC to help all of these different utilities, or to regulate the different utilities. Without the PSC being involved, the feds control everything. So right now, the whole federal government is inside of the state of Montana controlling all of our utilities, because the state of Montana itself doesn't regulate it. So it puts it onto the FCC and multiple other divisions of the federal government, who now control what happens with all of our communications inside of the state of Montana.
So is it your thoughts, Dean, that is something that we can wrestle away from the feds if we just make it large enough of a stink about it? Or if we come together, if all the members of the Public Service Commission came together and lobbied the federal government to sort of take that control back and get it back in the hands of Montanans? Because I'm always, not in all cases, but I'm generally in favor of having the states control that stuff as opposed to the feds. Because, I mean, I don't want to go into a diatribe about the feds, but you may or may not agree with that. But I would like to see many things come back to the states, that included. Any comment on that, Dean?
Yes, I agree. I think the feds are going to somewhat fight you as far as they possibly can, because they want control of everything. We would have to go to our legislators, and hopefully we get some good ones coming in who will help back some of this stuff. We can take control. We need to be under state control of this, not federal control. The PSC itself cannot tell anybody to get out or stay out or so on and so forth. It's just a regulatory branch. But if we can get state control of all of this, then we can use the state laws to fight against the feds to get them out, and basically try to jump underneath the 10th Amendment. We're a sovereign state. We'll control what's inside of our state borders. And that's where I would like to go with this.
You know, and I don't know what state this was. I want to say it's South Dakota, but they passed a resolution that any resolution that came from the federal government or any law or any mandate had to go before. I want to say it was South Dakota, had to go before their legislature and be approved by their legislature before they actually would enact it. So I think that's an excellent step. And again, I know that we know the Public Service Commission isn't in that role, but you'll still be in government and still be a public servant and in that sense. So I mean that probably still has meaning to you, I'm sure. That is an excellent step, I think, in the right direction. Would you agree? Just taking, the government, the feds can say what they want, but if the states review it and say, listen, it doesn't work for our state because it violates the rights of our people, I think that's a good step in the right direction. Any comment on that, Dean?
Yeah, I would love to see something like that. The PSC, I feel, should be hand in hand with the legislature while they're in session. The PSC works year round. So with the PSC, they should know what's going on in the whole utility industry. Okay, now real quick, the PSC regulates power, communications, water, and gas on privately owned utilities or companies, because they're not all considered utilities. That's the purview of what the PSC does. They should be in there talking to the energy board. They should be talking to the legislature when they're in session. We should be pushing to get bills passed to help the PSC regulate what they need to regulate and to keep the feds out. With what you said, I think that's great all the way across the board, even outside of the utilities. Any federal law passed should have to go in front of some sort of a board, whether it's a legislature or something like that, inside of the state of Montana to say, we accept it or we don't, or it doesn't work for us, or we should be able to have our own decisions in our own state.
Dean, we're coming up on a break here. When we get back on the other side, we're going to talk about green energy. You saw in Texas here, I think it was last year, a couple of years ago, where a grid down situation. There was a lot of turmoil there in the Lone Star State and energy wise. And they, of course, are saying that, some talking heads are saying we need more green energy. We need more windmills. If we had more windmills and all that stuff there, wouldn't have happened. We can talk about that and other things. No, I'm not against alternative energies, even nuclear. But see, the people I think behind it don't have exactly, the best interest of the folks in mind. I think they have the best interest of their pocketbooks in mind in a lot of cases. And I think there's an overall larger agenda. But we can talk about that on the other side. Dean, where can people find out more about you before we go? I know you're working on your website now. It should be up pretty soon. Anything else you'd like to give out to folks here before we go to take a quick break?
I have an email, Crabb, CRABB, the number 4, PSC @gmail.com. I also have a phone number. Feel free to call me. I'm at area code 406-304-9310. I will have a Facebook site set up by the end of the week, and I will have a website, should be set up on Monday.
Very good. Dean Crabb, candidate for Montana PSC District 5. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on the broadcast. When we get back on the other side, we're going to talk about green energy and what kind of future that has here in Montana, if any. CriticalDisclosure.com, CriticalDisclosure.com, BrighteonRadio.com. If you go ahead and hit that button, Dean, appreciate that. We'll be back after these brief messages here on the broadcast. Today's broadcast is sponsored by Heaven's Harvest Emergency Survival Food. Folks, as you can probably tell from watching the news, there's about to be a real big food shortage in this country. The trucker strike all across the world, especially here in the United States and Canada, is going to stop the food from flowing in here. There's no better time than right now to plant a garden for this spring. Spring is just around the corner, and you can save on shipping over at heavensharvest.com by going to heavensharvest.com and typing in Jim at checkout. Now, all you need to do is buy an heirloom seed vegetable kit or any food bucket and type in Jim at checkout, and you'll receive free shipping. Folks, don't wait. There's not much time left before the food supply is literally going to be shut down. We see this on the news every day. It's time to take your food security in your own hands Do that by going to heavensharvest.com, picking up an heirloom vegetable seed kit, type in Jim at checkout. heavensharvest.com.
PatriotPrepared.com carries the leading brands of storable food from Legacy and Heaven's Harvest. Patriot Prepared. Our name says it all. We're dedicated to empowering you to be self-reliant and confident in any circumstance. Whether you want to be prepared in the event of an emergency or you're an outdoor sports enthusiast, PatriotPrepared.com has prepackaged meals and kits for your entire family. Legacy, Heaven's Harvest are known for high-quality, great-tasting, GMO-free, nutritious food with no chemical preservatives. Simple to prepare, easy to store, gluten-free and organic high-quality nutrition options with a 25-year shelf life. You can't beat the feeling of being food secure when you need it most. So go to PatriotPrepared.com right now to pick up your supply of high-quality storable food for your family, because it makes good sense to be prepared. That's PatriotPrepared.com.
Okay, folks, thanks for hanging on for the break. And not only is food security important, but also your financial security is important, and you can lock in the value of the money today that's losing value daily. Unfortunately, the dollar in your pocket's losing value every day. You can lock some of that value in at 7K Metals, 7kmetals.com/Carla J. That's 7kmetals.com/Carla J. And you can get on a monthly program where it's mailed to you each and every month. You don't have to do a lot of brain work. You just sign up for the program, and you have it delivered to your house every month. You can call Carla at 406-855-2761. That's 406-855-2761. Or again, visit her website at 7kmetals.com/Carla J. And when you support the sponsors here, you support this broadcast. Okay, thanks for hanging out at the break. We're here with Dean Crabb, who's a candidate for the Montana Public Service Commission, District 5. Folks, we broadcast here 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on a variety of different networks, including Brighteon Radio, brighteonradio.com. Dean, thanks for hanging out after the break. And, let's talk green energy. I like the concept of having more than one choice. That is a good thing, generally speaking. It's competition for everyone, and it keeps the prices lower if you can get into that situation. Keeps the prices down because there's competition for people's dollars. Seems to me, though, the green energy program is a lot of that power been concentrated at the top, and there's a lot of, let's say, groups that may not have the best interests of the United States in mind that are trying to run this program here. We can talk Agenda 2030. We can talk all kinds of stuff, but that may be a topic for another show. Give us, if you can, Dean, your thoughts about green energy and what you see as far as where it's going. Do you agree with my assessment that it seems to be there are certain players involved that may not have our best interests in mind? I'll turn it over to you, Dean. Let's talk green energy here for a few minutes.
Well, my opinion on green energy is there's nothing wrong with it, whether it's wind, solar, it's fine. It can't control the amount of power that's used. It is so far below anything that we can use. It's not even funny. They're looking at it right now as it's going to be the savior. It's going to be done in the next 5 years. We're going to be 100% green energy. They even wrote it in the Green New Deal. I forwarded an ad or advertisement thing that they did. They want all natural gas gone. They were already getting rid of coal. The problem is solar and wind can't do what natural gas does and what coal does. They just don't generate enough power. They only work when the wind is blowing or when the sun is shining. You cannot turn them on and turn them off like you do. A perfect example is hydro. Okay, you could be running half base at hydro sitting right now, and all of a sudden something happens, you need a bunch more power. You can simply crank up the hydro and put out more power, and you can do that 24 hours a day. Doesn't matter what day of the week, whether it's light, dark, anything else out, you can just turn it up or turn it down as you need it. You don't have that option with wind and solar. It either works or it doesn't. The biggest state most people think it's California, Nevada, things like that who have the most solar. It's not. It's the highest amount of green energy right now is out of the state of Texas, and it's at 8%. And at 8%, it's not enough. I mean, we saw what happened a couple years ago, a year ago when everything went down. It's just not enough to keep things going. It's not consistent enough. It's not reliable enough. I keep telling everybody, every single part of the green energy is government subsidized. If you took away all of those government subsidies and made it stand alone on its own, like coal does or gas does or hydro does, it'd be gone. They wouldn't do it. No, I don't think anybody would build solar. 90% of the people who are putting it on their homes would never do it because it wouldn't pay itself back. The windmills, even over 30 years, don't pay themselves back to the investment without the government money being put into it. And that's the only reason why people keep going with it. They have a lot of reliability issues with windmills. I've worked on quite a few different windmill places. A lot of people don't know this, but there's 3 phases to electricity. There's an A phase, a B phase, and a C phase. All 3 of those are timed at exactly the right time to create a wavelength, which gives you your 3 phases. If they come out of time by a certain distance, that phase shuts down. And that's what happens to the windmills a lot. They don't stay consistent with your A, B, and C phase to be put up onto the grid to consistently be putting power out. They're notorious for losing a B phase, and then it knocks out your A and C. So you always have to be there bringing them up, taking them down, bringing them up, taking them down. Solar is pretty simple. It works when the sun shines. It doesn't when it's not. It goes down to 50%, some of the times less, when you have shady days and snowstorms and things like that. I know that they're looking at a site out in Billings that they were going to build, which is a 30 megawatt site. But you're not pulling 30 megawatts in our dark days. You start hitting November, December, there's no way you're pulling 30 megawatts out of that site.
Well, a couple of things I'd like to comment on. First of all, the windmills, from what I understand, kill a lot of birds. It does a lot of damage to the bird population, and I don't know what type of birds. If more birds are more susceptible, but I know they run into those windmills, and I think they don't see them, and it knocks them out. And I've always thought, and you can correct me on this, Dean, I always thought that there was battery technology that, for example, even though, let's say it's only sunny on Monday and Tuesday or Wednesday that week, the extra sun is stored in a battery, so on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you can utilize that battery and tap into that and still get that energy. Is that not true? Is that something that's that I'm not wind? So wind, the same thing. I heard that you can do that with the windmills as well. Store them in batteries. Do the batteries just lose their power too quickly to be able to be efficient? Or do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. First of all, with the windmills, as far as the birds go, they do kill a lot of birds. They have shut down quite a few windmills. You start getting into, you got to look at different states where they shut them down because, the environmentalists get more uptight in different states than they do in Montana. They have killed, raptors and different things like that. And then all of a sudden they got to get shut down and locked up and so on and so forth. A lot of people don't realize that those windmills, the tower itself is close to 300 feet tall. The blades are 120 feet tall. And when you get 100 of those things that are just spinning around, a bird's trying to fly through it. They don't see the blades coming by, and like I say, they're flying 50 feet above it. Well, that blade's 120 feet above it. So the numbers are pretty high for the birds that they have killed. As far as the batteries go, now we know what happened in Texas, right? When you charge up those batteries, if you look at the amount of energy that is put into a transmission line and the amount of energy that comes out of these power plants, and you figure there's 40 power plants in a state. If you put even let's say 50 of those big battery packs, which are ridiculously expensive, it would take, if nothing else is running like what happened in Texas, it would take anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes to drain those batteries.
Wow.
And then you're done, you're out of power again.
Wow, that fast, huh? Jeez.
We're pushing at any given time 40, 50 gigawatts of power through our state. So, I mean, there's an enormous amount of power that goes through all of this. So for you to put a battery on a single site or multiple batteries on a single site, it doesn't come anywhere close to what, what you have to be able to run a state. The other thing that you have to look at too, even with the batteries that they're talking about, with the windmills, with the solar, we're using more and more and more energy every single day. I mean, just look at the borders. How many people have come across the border in the last 2 years?
Sure.
We now have to give energy to all of those people.
That's right.
We're not building energy fast enough. We're not building windmills or solar. And even with the windmills and solar that are built, you'd be hard pressed to run just the amount of people who've come across the border in the last 2 years with the windmill and the solar.
Well, so what do you think about this here? And this is like a little bit of a different kind of energy thing. I believe one of the oil companies is taking the off gassing from the drilling, and they're doing Bitcoin mining with that off gassing. Have you heard about that? I just saw it a couple of days ago. Are you familiar? Because I know Bitcoin takes up Bitcoin mining, and whether you believe in Bitcoin or not, folks, that's not the point. The point is a lot of people do, and a lot of people mine Bitcoin, and it takes a lot of energy to do so. What do you think about those alternative type things, Adine, where you take the off gassing from the oil and you turn it, instead of just letting it go in the atmosphere, you recycle it into something that maybe is considered somewhat useful? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Every technology we can come up with is going to help, and the more we learn, the better off we are. And that's going to be the same in anything that you do. If you can take extra gases that are just going to go off into the air or whatever, I'm all for it. Yeah, if you can turn around and use that to generate, basically run a bunch of computers is what they're doing. If you can do that, then great. And there's all kinds of different technologies. There's, new generator technology out there called no-cog generators, which could literally triple the amount of power coming out of our existing hydro plants that are here now. I think we should be looking at that. We should be looking at, they have, I know a lot of people have been talking about nuclear and stuff. They have a fairly new thing out there. They're kind of expensive, but they're called lead balls. And it's not a nuclear that can burn up because it's already spent energy. So they just put existing spent energy inside of a big bucket of sand, basically. It's a lot bigger than that. And then they wrap the whole thing with lead. So in case anything did go wrong, it's sealed and contained. And something like that can run, multiple blocks of homes at a time, and they can run them for 10 to 20 years. So there's all kinds of technologies coming out that I think we should look at. The biggest problem that we have to look at right now is we're not there with any of this energy yet, any of this technology. The feds are putting it on us like it's already there, it's ready to go, it's ready to roll, and switch over to it, and everything's going to be fine. And they're going to end up shutting off all of our power. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's in the Green New Deal that they passed that they're going to do it. So we better be ready for when that happens. And the number one way to do that is to get our power out of the feds and under state control. And then have enough people strong enough inside of the state of Montana that when the feds come to shut it off, we say, no, not going to happen.
No, I think that could be done in a lot of different areas. It's just the people have the will to do that. And when you understand that 50% of the budget from the state of Montana comes from the feds, at least that's the numbers that I heard from some legislators. Boy, it's kind of hard to cut off that hand, the hand that's feeding you. And that's pretty common. That's a pretty commonplace is they utilize those federal funds to be able to, like a carrot and a stick to get the states to do what they want to do. We just got to come to a break here in about 45 seconds, Dean. And when we come back on the other side, let's talk about energy. We don't have to go down the rabbit hole with this, but a guy named Tesla many, many years ago apparently came up with free energy. And it's all around us, from according to his research. And you wonder, are we ever going to get to a point where we're going to be able to utilize some of the work that he did? And they may be doing it some of it secretively, but boy, I tell you, he sure was on top of things way back in I think it was the 20s. But we can talk about that and other things when we get back on the other side with Dean Crabb, candidate for Montana PSC District 5. I'm your host, James White. This is Critical Disclosure Radio. CriticalDisclosure.com, or NorthwestLibertyNews.com. We'll be back after these brief messages with Dean Crabb. Okay, folks, thanks for hanging out for the break. I'm your host, James White. This is Critical Disclosure Radio, hosted on Brighteon Radio. We come to you each weekday, 10 to 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, on a variety of different networks, and you can find all that information out by going to libertylinks.io/Jim's Links. It's libertylinks.io/Jim's Links, and that information is down below here. We had a funny comment, Dean. Thanks for hanging out for the break. Out here with Dean Crabb, candidate for Montana PSC District 5. We had somebody comment in one of the chat rooms when we were talking about the windmills, Dean. They said one solution is to open a KFC franchise under the windmill. So when all those birds fall down, you got. I don't think they were being serious, but that is kind of a funny concept. We appreciate you being here with us today, Dean, and we're going to talk about energy because that's sort of the purview of the Montana Public Service Commission. Now, there was a guy many years ago named Nikolai Tesla, and we kind of touched about that briefly before we went to break. Sounds like he was, well, that sounds like, but the evidence proves that he was pretty much onto something as far as energy being all around us, the concept of potentially free energy. And, you know, when you give energy away for free, since energy is probably the number one, I think, what we pay for every month and our bills and our expenses, energy is probably, food and energy, of course, is always, and one could argue that, you know, food's energy as well, just for your body. But energy is one of the things that we spend the most money on. And for them to be able to allow that to go for free to people when they can charge them trillions of dollars perhaps over the aggregate, they just can't let that kind of opportunity go. So give me your thoughts, if you can, Dean, on the concept of alternative energy sources and alternative sources of gas. And is there a bright future as far as not necessarily windmill, not necessarily solar, but again, these you talked about a bus. I think we just talked about a bus line that pulls energy from the power lines. Talk, if you can, Dean, about alternative energy sources, including alternative sources for gas.
Sure. So there's different technologies that are out there. We were speaking about semi-trucks. As long as they run along a transmission line, so understand there is power being generated down that transmission line, they can actually draw the EMF and they run them, and they're doing it right now. There's trucks out there that run straight down transmission lines. They can draw the EMF into the truck and actually run the electric motor and haul the truck around. There is electricity everywhere. It's in the air, it's in the ground. It is everywhere. Static electricity. The ground itself is used as a conductor all across the United States, and we actually transmit electricity through the ground. There is a large transmission line that runs from Los Angeles, California to Washington State, and they actually have a conductor through the ocean, which is the ground part of the conductor, and then they have 4-aught wires that run from California all the way up to Washington. They absorb all of the energy that they can out of the ground, and then with the ocean being the ground part to complete the circuit, they actually bring out that energy, and that is a 500,000 volt DC transmission line that runs 24 hours a day. It brings an enormous amount of energy out there, and there is no power plant tied to that line. It does nothing but absorb what's in the ground. And if you know how electricity works, most everybody has to put a ground to protect their system and everything in the ground. Poles have grounds that go from the neutrals down into the ground. We ground them consistently. We use the ground itself as a conductor. If we can absorb that energy and take that energy, just turn around and put it back into a system, they do it. Now, granted, I mean, California to Washington is a long distance to get energy, and you kind of have to use that type of a deal or go that type of a distance to be able to absorb that. But there are multiple different technologies that are out there. People have used them. And like I say, there's static everywhere. So yes, if we can find a way to harness the static, we can get it. As clouds go by, more static is generated. As waves go, more static is generated. There's constantly power being made throughout throughout the world, the earth itself, just by the way that the earth works with clouds. And, I mean, that's where lightning comes from. That's all energy. It's there, it's floating. For us to harness it, as they said, of course, now I'm going to draw a blank on a very simple thing, right? Go fly a kite with a key on it, right? You can get energy.
Yeah, Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin did that, right?
Exactly, Ben Franklin. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't.
No,
slipped my mind.
Now, question for you. So I've heard that, here's something that concerns me a little bit. I've heard that, okay, so with the global, the geopolitical upheaval from nations that have sophisticated war technologies, for example, like EMPs. Let's use that for an example. I've heard that it would cost $2 billion only. When I say only, that's a lot of money, of course, for guys like you and I. But when you're sending $12 billion over to foreign countries, who knows where that money's going? You can certainly take $2 billion and fortify the power the power stations all across the country. I've heard it cost about $2 billion with the potential, foreign intervention in some of the, these conflicts. What's prevent one of them from dropping an EMP bomb? Because an EMP bomb here in the United States, if they did that and they wiped out the power grid, I mean, it's lights out, no pun intended, for everybody here, because we depend upon it so much. Does it frustrate you, Dean, that we can send all kinds of money over to foreign countries and all these harebrained schemes, but we can't spend $2 billion to fortify all of our power stations across the country from EMP attacks? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it bothers me that we send billions of dollars to other countries, whether we put it into the EMP scenario or not. So you have to look at it that the system itself, the whole grid, okay, it's a mechanical grid, right? It's wire, it's switches, it's nuts and bolts throughout the whole system, right? Of all of the Western grid and the Eastern grid, the whole United States. EMPs aren't going to affect the mechanical part of the system itself. It gets struck by lightning, right? If we can handle a lightning strike, we can handle an EMP strike. The lightning is 10 times more the power. We have the technology, and it's all mechanical, by the way, to where it blows out certain things and then it only knocks out a small little section. We can get back in there and fix it. As long as the PSCs and the PUCs throughout the United States are doing their job, 100% of this network must be set up mechanical. We have relays, we have everything should be there. It's our old analog system. It is supposed to be kept up and maintained.
Hold on a minute. Wait. Okay, I'm confused here a little bit. Go over what you just said again. So there's analog systems in place before the advent of computers. Are you talking about? Because computers have to be involved in that equation in some sense, and that's what I think the vulnerability to the EMPs are going to be, like the computer systems that aren't protected. The mechanical stuff you're talking about, like the hardware, let's say, for example, if you want to think of it that way, sure, it's not going to, the nuts and bolts and those things, it's not going to affect that, but it's going to affect the computers that control everything. Am I not making the connection properly?
No, you're absolutely correct. But the way that it's supposed to work, when we started bringing in all of this digital computer and bringing in, there's a system out there called SCADA, right? Stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. That is how we tie together all of our power plants, all of our switching stations, all of our switches that are out there in the field. We know when something happens 100 miles down the line, the second it happens, because of our data that we have. But the whole system back into the 1940s, 50s, 60s, when there were no computer systems, was an old analog system. When we went digital, it was required by the utilities through the Public Utilities Commissions and the Public Service Commissions to keep up our analog system 100%. So if there is an EMP, if Putin does turn around and hit our, power plants and shut them down, he can only do it through the computer. It will take the system out, but all we have to do is drive to the system, flip a switch, we come back up on analog, and our system's all back up and running again.
Is that in place as far as you know? Are those analog systems being maintained? Do you have any knowledge about that? Because I had never heard about, I've been covering this EMP stuff for a long time. I had never heard what you just said right there about the analog systems having to be kept in line as a fail-proof, as a failover for the EMP attack. Is Montana's? Let's just start with Montana. Is Montana's analog system still in place? Do you know?
I don't know. I've looked on it. I've tried to find out. I cannot find the information. I can tell you in 5 different states that I've dealt with that I know of, all 5 of those states are 100% still ready to go on analog. It's a requirement in the state that it doesn't matter what you do digitally. You can do all the technology you want to digitally. You must keep your analog system up, running, and tested consistently throughout the year in every single one of those states.
So what you're telling me here is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what you're telling me, if there is in fact 5 out of the 5 states that you looked into had the analog systems in place, and if one would assume that the majority of the states do, one would think, then the EMP attack is nothing more than just like fear porn. When people start getting everybody riled up about EMP, I'm hearing from you that sure, it may be a temporary delay, but if they just go back to retro, the old analog retro system, they can have stuff back up and running in, what do you say, a day? Less than a day? Hours? How robust is that system? Do you know?
Absolutely. It's all that you have to do is physically go to the site, flip the switch, and it's back on and running. It's mechanical.
Wow.
You got to go back and look. Electricity's been around since the 1920s, right? How much has been affected from that point, even until today with the digital, How many times has electricity gone down through something like an EMP or a sunburst or all of the different things that they talk about? This would have been consistent within the 30s, 40s, 50s, and stuff like that if it was consistently happening. But under the analog system, it doesn't affect it. We have ways of taking spikes of electricity, just like lightning. Lightning hits, it could be 1 billion volts coming through there with massive amounts of ampacity. It goes in, it blows out a wire, we go out, we replace the wire, and the system's back up and running again. The energy is very consistent for what you look at for the amount of years that it's been going on, right? I like to think old school because old school works. Nuts and bolts don't break. The mechanical part of it, as long as it's there, will always be there and it will always work. It's the new digital stuff that technology, that a lot of this stuff can get to. As long as we have kept up the old, we're good. And by the way, the reason why they've done this is because they understand electricity is life. And you
Sure.
have to look at it that way. It's as important nowadays as food.
Yeah.
It's our heat. It's our cooling. It's our, everything out here runs on electricity. We can't let this electricity go down even for a week. It can't happen. We got to be able to keep it up, get it back up, and get it running. And that's why I'm so afraid of what the feds are trying to do with shutting off the gas. They've already shut off the coal. They're trying to shut off our electricity, and they don't care what it does. And that's where we have to protect ourselves. As far as like you're talking about the EMPs and all the other stuff, the safety measures should be there. I don't know for a fact because I can't find the information in the state of Montana. I don't even know if the PSC itself is even looking at it or if they know enough to look at it, to be honest with you. But it should be there and it should be in place. And if any of this stuff happens, you just switch over to mechanical, all the electricity comes back up, and you're good to go.
Wow, I mean, I don't sound modest when I say this, but very rarely do I learn something like that during an interview. And I've never even heard of what you just stated about that analog system being in place as a backup because, a lot of people have sold a lot of videos and a lot of stuff on this EMP thing. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not, an EMP wouldn't, sure, it'd probably affect your vehicle. I think it'd probably knock your car out or something, maybe your cell phone. But those can be replaced. I was, my concern was always about the electrical grid at large being knocked out for 6 months at a time. But you're telling me, because that's the big doomsday scenario, is they shoot an EMP and knock out the power for 6 months and. They come back in and turn the power on and 80% of the population's dead because they just can't live without energy, like you just stated. Sounds to me that that's not really maybe accurate, which is a good thing. I'm glad to hear you tell me about that analog system. Believe me. Now, what happened if you can? Now, you may not know the answer to this. This is kind of an outlier question here. But about 15 years ago out east, all the power went out on the East Coast. I mean, it went out for quite some time. There was like a transformer blew or something. Why did the analog system, you may not know, you can pass on this question if you're not familiar with it because it's not even around here. It was out east. I was actually doing some training in Chicago, and where I lived in Michigan, the power was all out there, but the power was still on in Chicago because there's a grid, like the grid, I guess, cut off in Michigan or something. At any rate, are you familiar with what happened out there about 15 or years ago or so, and why did not the analog system kick in when that happened? Or was that a totally different matter?
Well, I'm a little bit familiar. I'm trying to remember back. Now, a transformer that goes out is mechanical. So the analog part isn't going to help that part. If the transformer itself goes down, and just so you know, there's two different types of transformers, but the one main transformer that everybody uses, there are no moving parts in that transformer. It's just a bunch of coils on one side and a bunch of coils on the other, and it transforms from one voltage to another and one ampacity to another. If that goes out, that is a mechanical part of the system itself. So until you replace that part, it would be like missing a piece of wire or missing the bolts out of a connector or something like that. So the digital part had nothing to do with that. If something like that does go down, then it does go down. Now, with the networks, we have what we call grid ties, grid loops. We can backfeed from other sections. Depending on where this exactly was, if they had a loop tie into the thing, they could have done a bunch of switches in here and there and gotten a lot of people back up. It depends on where the area was. And I've always been West Side, so I didn't follow a lot of the East Coast stuff. I can tell you that Oregon and California, and I think part of Nevada went out about 10, 12 years ago, and they blamed it on a mouse, saying it chewed up the fiber.
Right, really? No kidding. Isn't that funny? Well, let me just ask you a general question. As we sit here today, Dean, on the 6th day of April, do you feel that our power grid, not only in the United States, but here in Montana specifically, do you feel that it's adequately, has the adequate amount of safeguards in place to prevent against an attack? Or would you be more, maybe even a cyber attack? That seems to be the thing now, is not the whole dropping a bomb, but cyber attacking and going in and altering the system where it shuts a lot of things down. How safe do you think that our current power grid and power system in Montana is here today?
I don't know about Montana because I can't find the information. I can tell you, like, as far as the whole Western grid goes from the other states that I know about, it's very safe. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, they can create havoc, right? They can come in here with cyber attacks and everything else. They can shut the grid down, shut down every state on the whole Western United States and the Eastern United States. But as long as the power companies go out to it and flip the switch, they can bring it back up fairly quick. Now fairly quick, you got to cover a lot of miles. There's a lot of people spread in a lot of different states. You could get it back up within a day fairly easy. Once they bring it up analog, then they can repair all of the digital stuff, bring that back online. Now, granted, a week later, if they get it back onto digital again, yeah, they can knock it out again. They can keep knocking it out and keep knocking it out, but we can bring it back. It's not that it's going to go out for 6 months at a time. All we have to do is physically go to each place, flip it to the analog, which is a mechanical switch, and we can bring everything up and running all over again without having to have the digital. This is how everything ran back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up until, in some areas, even in the 1990s, because they didn't bring in the digital. They didn't put it on. The fiber was just being put in, some of it's still underneath copper lines. But it works, and if you go back to the analog system that worked for all of those different years, which is still supposed to be in place, you just flip the switch, bring it back up mechanically.
Boy, I sure would like to know if that's in place, Dean. I sure would like to know if that's in place. If there's some way we can find that out, it's got to be reported somewhere, one would hope, because I would certainly think that'd be a key item to keep current, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that is important. That's super important. Because like you said, electricity is life. That's for sure. Dean, we've only got about 4 minutes left in the interview. Things went by so fast. Just another question for you here to close out the broadcast and give you a chance to say whatever you'd like to say. But when people go into the voting booth there on, I think it's June 7th this year, why should they vote for you as opposed to any of the other candidates? Dean, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I come from a different area than all of the other candidates. I am a utility worker. I have been my whole life. My whole family has been for the last 4 generations. I know the utility industry. I am not a politician. I am not here to try to move forward. I don't want to move forward. I want to protect the state of Montana with all of its utilities, including electric, water, gas, like we were talking about, the safety of the fiber optics coming in here. I am a utility worker. I bring a completely different aspect to what's going on. We need to know that the safety is here. We need to know that all of the utilities are on board with everything that should be going on. We need to separate the power and the natural gas, for that matter, from the feds, because they're trying to take it away from us and shut us down. They're trying to basically hurt us when we need this as life, like we said. I mean, even food, you can't make food without electricity because 90% of the pumps are all electric. You can't get water. You can't get gas. Even if it was here, all of that stuff is pressurized through electric pumps. Without the electricity, it all goes down. It's massive what has to be done here. And we need to protect all Montanans and the state of Montana so that we can stand by ourselves and be able to stay alive by ourselves within our state, no matter what happens.
Well, speaking of that, real last question here: what happens to? Are we a net energy producer, or do we import? Do we export? Do you know the current status that we're in here in Montana?
From what I can find, we are an importer. However, I can't truly find the data. The PSC website is just I'm sorry, but it's horrific as far as trying to find any of this information. Most of the information that I found about the state of Montana, believe it or not, I found from the PUC in the state of Idaho. So I'm still trying to do more work to find out. Data is key with everything that we do. We need to look at every single utility within the state of Montana. The PSC right now does not do that. They only look at privately owned utilities within the state of Montana. They don't get data from any of the other people inside of this state. We need to see the state from border to border, all the way across, so that we can understand the data and know what we have. Right now, most of the co-ops get power from Bonneville Power, which, by the way, is owned by the federal government. And that's where that energy comes from. Now, granted, they take the energy from the inside of the state of Montana and transmit it throughout the state of Montana, but they also bring it in through the Western grid. So to try to find out what it is until we have data from every single utility out there into the PSC, we don't know.
Sounds like you're an overall smaller government guy in general. Is that accurate?
That is very accurate. It may seem like I want more government because of the PSC. I don't. We just need more data. I want Montana to stand alone on its own, right? The 10th Amendment says we are a sovereign state. We make our own decisions. We control ourselves. That is the whole philosophy behind me in the state of Montana.
Now you're trying to start to sound like me, Dean, and people call me a conspiracy theorist, but so be it, right? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Well, it's written in the Green New Deal that they are going to shut gas off.
Oh, it's no conspiracy. I know it's not a conspiracy. Believe me. No, it's fact. It's fact. We're just out of time here, Dean. We appreciate you being here on the broadcast. Dean Crabb, candidate for Montana PSC District 5. And why don't you go ahead and give out your phone number again real quick, Dean? We got about 20 seconds.
Sure. 406-304-9310.
There you go, folks. That's the end of the broadcast. CriticalDisclosure.com. That's CriticalDisclosure.com. We appreciate Dean Crabb being here with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Until next time, this is James White for Critical Disclosure Radio, saying bye now.